The principle of zero-G flight is to throw the plane in the air and make it believe it is in vacuum.
Hello and welcome to episode 180 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. And Ian, where are you?
Jason, I am in Bordeaux, France.
Oh. I'm in Brooklyn. I have nothing interesting to say about that, but what have you been doing?
Well, sir, what have I been doing? Okay. So to start at the reason I'm sitting here in a hotel in Bordeaux, France, I yesterday flew on the Novespace Zero G A310 alongside the German Aerospace Research Center for a set of 31 parabolic flights. And it was the most amazing experience I have ever had in the air. Not even close to the next most amazing experience by far.
I don't hate you, but I hate you for doing this without me because it sounds and looks from the videos I saw freaking amazing.
It really is a special time. And we've got a special show for you today. Not only did I get to go on the flight, which you can read about on our blog, I'll talk a little bit more about it in just a few seconds, but coming up in the show, I was able to speak with Jean-François Clervoy, who is the chairman of Novespace, the organization that runs the actual aircraft. He is a fascinating guy. We scheduled about 15 minutes to chat, and we ended up talking for nearly an hour.
Now, was this the conversation in which you divulged that bit of information about another potential aircraft they had in mind, or are we not even allowed to talk about that?
No, we talked in depth about that.
Because I have not actually heard this yet.
Yeah.
But
Jason will never hear it. Jason will never hear it because he doesn't listen to the podcast.
I don't listen to podcasts. But I might actually go back and listen to this segment because, spoiler, they almost ended up with a very different aircraft than what they operate today.
Exactly. And not only did I talk with Jean-François and had a great conversation there, which you'll hear in a few minutes, but we also had a chance to talk with Bertrand Rameau, who is one of the 8 pilots for the Novespace A310. And he talked about what it's like to actually fly the aircraft and fly those parabolas. So we'll come to that in a bit. But I want to back up and talk about what happened beginning Saturday afternoon and how I got here, which was there are decisions that are made based on monetary ideas and logic that seems to make sense at the time.
Everything seems like a great idea when you're clicking the book button.
Right. And so what I did to get here, so I'm in Bordeaux now, and tomorrow I'm going to go up to Stockholm. And by the time you listen to the podcast, I will be in the office in Stockholm, having hit publish on the podcast button to send it out to you, wonderful people listening wherever you are. So I said to myself, I'm going to be in Europe. I might as well go to the office. I should make an effort to go to the office and see some new folks. And we've got some meetings to have, so it's going to be good. So what I did is I booked, and I think we mentioned this briefly last week, I booked Chicago, New York, Stockholm on Delta Airlines. And then I booked a separate ticket of Stockholm, Paris, Bordeaux, Paris, Stockholm on Air France. And so that concerned me for a variety of reasons. The first of which is, if anything happened to my Delta flight getting over here, there wasn't really any recourse to get me down to Bordeaux because it was a completely separate ticket. I would be relying on the good graces of Air France customer service agents at an outstation, no less.
Oh, yeah. The French are definitely known for bending the rules and getting you on a connecting flight when you don't deserve it.
So that was the first risk. But as it turns out, I had nothing to worry about there. I actually got a quote unquote upgraded on my Delta flight from Chicago to New York because there was a family that was trying to sit together. So they moved me up to an empty seat in, what was it, Comfort Plus? Whatever the, I guess, a little extra legroom on a CRJ 900 is. And so that was fine. Those seats, somebody tweeted at me, they're like, I'm so sorry, those are terrible seats. The actual seat is a terrible seat. And I was like, oh, how bad can it be? And then I sat in the seat and I was like, oh yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. They are terrible seats. The seats on the CRJ900s that Endeavor's operating, I guess it's the XJ registrations are these particular seats. I swear they're designed by a human being who has never sat down before.
Yeah, they're not great, but I spent some time on a similar CRJ, but a United Special CRJ 550 the other day, but I was nestled up in first class after I paid for an upgrade just to try it out, and quite comfy.
Yeah, so I didn't get the full luxury of first class on this particular flight, but I did get to sit in Comfort Plus. But the thing I was kind of bummed about is they moved me out of a window seat into an aisle. It was fine. But anyway, we landed at JFK, took a couple laps around, took the bus from T2 to T4, took a couple laps around T4 and boarded the flight to Arlanda. And there happened to actually be a Flight Radar 24 fan and podcast listener on the flight. I don't know if he wants me to publicize his Twitter handle or name, so I will just say it was great to meet you. I'm glad we got to meet up, and thanks for coming by and saying hi. So flight to Arlanda on the Delta 767-300. Let's discuss for a moment what happened on that flight, which was the crew was very good. The plane itself was not. They had to reset the entertainment system 6 times. They had to reset the internet twice. Multiple economy class galley ovens were not working. So they delayed service an hour to serve everybody at once because they had to move some of the food up into the first class galley, but of course they serve the first class folks first. So they had to wait till, or Delta 1 folks first. So they had to wait until they were served so that they could then cook the economy class food.
Yikes. I know we talked about this last week, that we're starting to get shades of the American 767 fleet.
Yeah.
But it's hit or miss on Delta with the 767s. Some of them are kept up really well. They were just recently refurbished when they installed Premium Select. Your aircraft may not have had it. Do you happen to recall?
No, it had Premium Select. Yeah,
that's not great.
It was a well refurbished,
but it's getting tired.
Aircraft. But it's getting tired. Yeah, it's kind of the behind the scenes things. The only other thing that I wasn't particularly fond of throughout the flight was the level of turbulence involved. Normally, turbulence doesn't bother me. The problem was it was bad enough for long enough that they kept the seatbelt sign on.
That's just Delta or any U.S.-based airline will keep it on the whole time.
I was like, okay, that's fine. But this is an 8-hour flight and I need to get up now. So anyway, we landed early, no less. I made the transfer from Terminal 5 in Stockholm over to Terminal 2 via the airside bus, which was always fun to do in Stockholm because you get to see a whole bunch of carriers you're not going to see. Heston Aviation, some Amapola Flyg, Fokker 50s, all sorts of good fun stuff. Go over. The terminal is empty. Terminal 2 is empty when I get there. There's no one else in the terminal. Not people who work there, not passengers. It is empty. And so for a minute, I think to myself, I'm like, am I in the wrong place? Am I supposed to be here? I'm not sure what's going on. And luckily enough, the Starbucks of all places was open. So I figure, okay, the terminal's actually open and I'm allowed to be here.
Beacon of hope.
Yeah, let's not go that far. Just a beacon of being open, which, proved the point. So fly down on a delayed flight. The inbound was delayed coming up from Paris, so that flight was delayed. When the gate agent says, please do not break down the doors, things are going very well.
Did anyone break down the door or were they compliant?
No, they were compliant. Nobody broke down the doors. So that was good. Nobody on my flight, at least. It was the standard Air France massive boarding where everybody that's getting on the plane decides that they're going to boarding group. Who cares? I'm getting on now. So everybody rushes through the boarding gate and then stands on the jet bridge.
You had boarding, not boarding.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
Good.
Everybody
so
rushes in.
Some things are back to normal.
Yeah, it's perfectly normal. And then make it down to Bordeaux and everything works out because my Paris-Bordeaux flight was also delayed, which meant that I didn't have to hustle to make my flight. And then I got here, and that was 21 hours of traveling, a 30-hour day. Arrived here, and then Monday got to work getting ready to prep for the Zero G flight, which included getting a flight suit, which was fun, and going through a lot of the safety briefings again. and then just kind of preparing for Tuesday's flight. And then Tuesday's flight was a very early start. And my start was early. The people who are on these flights performing their experiments, the plane is opened at 6 a.m. They can get to the plane as early as 6 a.m. to make sure that by 9 a.m. their experiments are ready to go. And they work so hard. They're here a week before the flights, preparing the experiments. It takes 3 to 4 days to load the experiments onto the aircraft. And again, you can go to the blog to see pictures of some of these experiments and how they work and what these folks are doing. But a lot of them, the experiments can weigh up to 200 kilograms. And there are a few that weigh more than that because they were grandfathered in before the new sized down rules. The rule used to be 400 kilograms. So there are some big racks and some really cool stuff. One of them was the space bike, which is a bicycle that is bolted to the aircraft floor. And the person who's riding the bike has all sorts of electrodes and a brain scan helmet and all sorts of things attached to them. And then
it's actually the APU. Yeah.
Yeah, they're actually the APU. They pedal in microgravity. And so the experiment, the thing they're trying to figure out, and it's not about biking per se, but it's about the brain's control of the muscles in microgravity. How well do the muscles respond to the signals that the brain is sending? And the bike is as it was explained to me by the scientists who designed the experiment, basically the bike is the perfect method to study this because you've got up and down motion, you've got circular motion, you've got left and right. And so all of those things work together to give you a really good idea of what's happening. So they can figure out what are the muscles' responses to the brain in microgravity. And this is going towards studying, okay, we're going to be living and working on the moon in the next decades. We're going to be going to Mars, living and working on Mars in the next few decades. What do astronauts need to do? How do they need to do things differently and things like that? Another really cool experiment was cool flame. So not like
what?
Flames are cool, but like cool temperature flames.
Like Cool Ranch?
Sure, like Cool Ranch. How these flames propagate in microgravity.
Wait, so there wasn't like an open flame on the aircraft as you're in a parabolic dive with microgravity?
Yes, correct. Well, it's a closed flame.
You had a much better Tuesday than I did. I'll tell you that much.
Well, I mean, at this point, probably. I mean, I'm not even gonna dispute that. I'm still giddy about the thing, and this is Wednesday. So that experiment is just on the propagation of different fuels and different mixtures of oxygen-rich environments. Basically, if there's a fire in space, how best to put it out?
Is this the kind of thing they want to know, but they're not willing to actually test in space on the space station because fire bad in space?
Fire bad in space. So it's better to learn about how bad fire is not in space.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then another one that was on board was a refueling test. So basically the supposition is that when we go to Mars, when we go to the moon, when we go beyond the moon, wherever we go, it might be Mars, it might be somewhere else, who knows, you're going to need to start refueling ships in space. And that presents a whole host of challenges because how do you make sure that the fuel that's in liquid form stays in liquid form as you transfer it to the other tank? And so they're experimenting with different mediums and how to do that and different pressurization techniques and all sorts of good fun stuff. So some really cool experiments on board. And the one that was kind of part of the space bike one, but was a little bit different, is they had a test subject jumping during the hypergravity. So what happens in the parabolic flights is that you're flying at level flight at 20,000 feet. And then you hear the countdown, 1 minute, 30 seconds, 20, 10, 5, 3, 2, 1, pull up. At the pull up, they pull back on the yoke and they pull up from level up to 50 degrees nose up. And so in those 20 some odd seconds, you are experiencing 1.8 Gs and you're being pressed into whatever you're either standing or sitting or lying on or whatever. So in that pull-up phase, and then the subsequent pull-out phase on the back end of the weightlessness, those people were jumping. I tried to do it.
Couldn't do it?
I couldn't do it.
Huh. I mean, I was in an elevator today that moved pretty fast. I know that's more than 1 G, but probably not as dramatic as, what was that, 1.8 Gs?
Between 1.8 and 2, but the goal is 1.8. And so I thought that was amazingly impressive. But the insertion or injection into microgravity was such a weird experience that it's tough to describe, because you're sitting in an airplane seat, or you're laying on the floor, or you're just standing up holding onto something. And then all of a sudden, you're just floating up in the air. And you've done nothing to do this. You haven't pushed off. You haven't done anything. You just start going up. And then for 22 seconds, the feeling of weightlessness takes you over, and you just kind of float there and move around, and you don't really have any control over like which way you're going unless you've pushed off of something. And then you hear the countdown and they pull up, and all of a sudden you go from weightless to 1.8 Gs again, really fast.
I have nothing to add to this. It all sounds quite amazing.
That was such a weird feeling. The feeling of going from weightless to hypergravity in an instant again. That for me was the weirdest thing. And I'm not ashamed to say that my digestive system and nervous system conspired against me a little bit.
Uh-oh. Did you need the high-tech bag?
I made use of the high-tech bag, very high-tech, super, super high-tech bag. But it went away, and then I was able to get back to work, making video and film for the fine people at home. So it all worked out. It was an amazing experience. And I think that having had that experience and learned about what the scientists are working on gives me a whole newfound respect for how they're doing it, having experienced that flight. With that, I want to shift over to our pair of interviews with Jean-François Clervoy and Bertrand Rameau. We'll kind of do them back to back and play those for you now. And you can learn a little bit more about how it works and how they almost ended up with a very different aircraft. And then when we come back, Jason can pretend that I hadn't yet told him, and we'll talk about it after we hear from Jean-François and Bertrand. So we'll be back after we talk with them. I spoke with Novespace chairman and former astronaut Jean-François Clervoy about the mechanics of parabolic flights, and he had a lot to say about that. But in the course of our conversation, I also learned that we came quite close to seeing a much different aircraft operating these flights.
We're sitting in Bordeaux. The A310's behind you. There happens to be a Beluga sitting next to the A310. I know it's not here for that, but have you ever given any thought to like what the perfect aircraft for Zero G would be? Like if you were starting this all over again and you had your choice of any aircraft.
In fact, since we didn't get for a long time the answer from the German Air Force about the A310 Konrad Adenauer, which transported Angela Merkel, this one.
Right.
We were pessimistic. And Airbus proposed to us to pay for the studies and the test flight to verify that the Airbus 380 could do it. And it was successful.
Really?
And we were supposed to announce at the Paris Air Show 2013 the partnership between Novespace and Airbus to continue zero-G flight for ESA, DLR, French Space Agency, with their own Airbus 380, the number 2 or the number 3. Because they said, we have a program that justify that we have a need for this aircraft, but that's not big enough to justify to maintain it in flight conditions.
Right.
It was to arrange the top floor into a very luxurious apartment for Emiratis and but we need to find another use to pay for the maintenance, to contribute to the maintenance. So they told us, we will organize a campaign for you, but you will have to combine 2 campaigns in one. It is so huge that the mid floor, I mean the main floor, you have the cargo and the 2 floor for passengers. The middle one is so huge, you could feel like 3 or 4 times what we have in this one. So they say in order to minimize, so it would have been a constraint for us because we would have been obliged to convince ESA, DLR to find dates where they can fly together. Yeah. It's feasible. Yeah. What was a bit frustrated for us is in that case we would have not been our own operator because we would have not managed the training of the pilots, etc. And a month or 2 before the Paris Air Show, the one head of Airbus told our partner, we consider that one other condition is we will price Novespace just the same amount you would price if you had your own Airbus, like the 300 or the 310. And then somebody at Airbus said it's too kind for Novespace because it costs far more, especially 4 engines, etc. Yeah. So he said, within Airbus management, they decided to review the pricing offered to Novespace to see if they could maybe price a bit more than what they had promised at the beginning. And in between, we received the answer from the German Air Force, okay. Because we had the head of CNES and the Minister of Defense talk to each other to find if it was possible, because DLR is a user, so DLR has an interest to favor this transfer. And in the meantime, we got a favorable answer from the German Air Force who said, we are ready to not put in auction that Airbus 310, which was the original plan, and we will sell you at the market price. So give us a price. We will see if it's reasonable, and we gave a price. They say okay, and so we have it. So what is nice is this is our own. We operate and manage ourselves like an airline company. We are our own operator of the plane. So it's more flexible because we don't have to make agencies, agree together on the planning for when to fly, etc. So to answer your question again in short, we have had the opportunity to look at big aircraft, which would be actually interesting only for shooting movies where they need big mock-ups. But when you fly people in Zero G, it's dangerous to have a huge volume. Because the Ilyushin 76, which has a smaller floor surface than this one, has a high ceiling, more than 4 meters high. You need to assign 1 safety attendant per passenger, ready to grab the foot. Because if you are at 4 meters when we do the pull-out, you will see during the pull-out, you are maximum 1 or 1.5 meter above floor. So our plane is good. I mean, it's maybe we have only 220 meter ceiling height. So maybe 250 would have been ideal. Otherwise, it's fine. It's okay. It's manageable. But Beluga, we have looked at how to get a longer time. Concorde would have given us 1 minute. If you use post combustion, high angle of pitch at each junction, you can get 1 minute of Zero G. But of course, Concorde is too expensive. And, at the end of life, there were some Concordes still able to fly.
Right.
So we look at the Airbus 380, but Beluga would be definitely too big too. So safety-wise, not manageable.
Could you explain the parabolic nature? Why can't you just fly and then dive? Why the parabolic?
Okay. So the principle of parabolic flight is to make the aircraft, to insert the aircraft into an Earth orbit. We demonstrate in physics that when you are outside a uniform sphere, the gravity is the same whatever the size of the sphere. So if you are outside Earth, the gravity field is the same as if all Earth was there. So imagine a virtual ellipse orbit like this. This is the arc of an actual Earth orbit. If there were no atmosphere, you would be in weightlessness here like when you are on an orbit around the Earth. So the principle of parabolic flight is to throw the aircraft in the air and make it follow this arc of an orbit at its apogee, where velocities and altitudes are within the qualified flight envelope of the plane, given by the constructor, Airbus. In order to maximize the time of weightlessness, we give the time of ascent and descent. When I throw this pen up, the time of weightlessness is the whole time. Because in physics, free fall doesn't necessarily start with a fall towards the floor. When you throw something in the air, it is called free fall in physics. Weightlessness is a state you are in when you are subject to gravity only. It's not the absence of gravity, it's when the only remaining force applied to an object is gravity and nothing else. When there is no surface contact force. In our daily life, we are submitted to gravity, which is a volume force. It applies from a distance to any grain of matter of your body, inside, outside. All the other forces we face in our daily life are contact forces, surface forces. So an airplane, why going up first is to double the time of weightlessness.
I also spoke with Bertrand Rameau, one of Novespace's 8 pilots. We talked about what it takes to become a zero-G pilot and what it's actually like to fly all of those parabolas.
Thank you so much for joining us. Really pleasure to sit and talk with you. And I'd start with a little housekeeping. Tell us your name and what you do here at Novespace.
Yep, I'm Bertrand Rameau. I'm one of the zero-G pilots here at Novespace since 7 years. We operate this Airbus A310, totally dedicated to this very special mission.
And how did you become a zero-G pilot for Novespace? This is a very, there aren't many of you. So how did you get here?
We are 7 right now, no 8, exactly 8. We introduced a brand new one this summer. Basically, I joined the team when Novespace purchased this A310 after the 300 B2 B4. And at this time, Novespace has decided to operate this aircraft by itself. Before that, it was operated by the French test center from the Air Force. And so when Novespace has decided to operate this aircraft by itself, they call us some specialists of the 310. So I flew the 310 for more than 10 years in the French Air Force. I was instructor, examiner, etc. So that's why I was called at the very, very beginning of this story. Basically, the 8 pilot, we are half pilot, are test pilot from the industry, Airbus, HER, and the French test center. And the other part, we are standard civilian airline pilot with a background of with a different background, usually military background. So we know a little bit more than usual how to make some aerobatics or something like that. So we have a past in the military and then an experience in airline or airline operation at least. And this mix creates the condition for Novespace to operate safely this aircraft with the both competencies, totally different competencies. On one part, the flight test competencies, and on another part, how to operate an aircraft in a regulated environment.
So how do you train? You mentioned that there are distinct differences between being a regular commercial pilot on the A310 or any other aircraft and this. What's that training like?
The training is very specific for this operation. So we begin on the simulator, just to learn not to fly the parabola, but to learn the music, how we operate. Because as probably you noticed this morning, we divide the axes and we operate this aircraft in a very specific manner. So we need to have a specific music tempo of the parabola. So we learn this tempo in the simulator. And in addition, we learn as well the emergency situation, so the recovery of what can happen during this parabola. So we are trained on the simulator about this special situation. Then we went to an aerobatic light aircraft just to perform a couple of parabolas and to be more not efficient, but more to put your head down and just to learn how his 50 degrees nose up, how his 50 degrees nose down, how the speed increase fast, etc., just for familiarization, right? And then we come here, we have 4 flights, dedicated flight, without any passengers, just us. We go to the over the sea and let's go. So you jump in a new world, and that's it. So we perform more or less 40-50 parabolas just for training. And then you join some scientific campaign or public flights, and you perform your first parabola with passengers on board, and you learn day after day, flight after flight. You need 100,000 of parabolas to be a regular parabolic pilot. It's matter of experience. Most of the best quality you have, you need experience for sure.
So describe for us what's happening on the flight deck as you go into the parabola, and walk us through the whole parabola.
So from the flight deck, first of all, we hide the windows to avoid some sun disturbance during the maneuver. When we climb or when we dive, the sun moves and we can have reflect. And to avoid this condition, we put some curtains on the lateral windows of the cockpit. So it's very dark inside the cockpit, and we keep only the 2 front windshield open, and that's it. And then we work at 3 pilots at the same time. So that means we divide the axis. So we have the pitch axis. So it will be fly by the one in charge of the accuracy of the parabola. So only push and pull. Focus on that. Focus on the accelerometer to provide the best zero possible. And that's his only task. So to fly the pitch, to fly 0G. On the second part of the aircraft, you have the pilot who is responsible for the lateral axis, for the roll. So we put 2 small lines, wires on the yoke, just to avoid some disturbance on the pitch. And we fly the aircraft like this. We keep the roll more or less at 0 during all the maneuver. This pilot is responsible as well of the music, of the tempo of the parabola. And the third one is in the middle, sit down on the jump seat, and is responsible for the thrust of the engine, to set up the full thrust for the entry in the parabola, and to set the good thrust during the parabola to obtain the best 0G on all axes during the maneuver. And so let's go inside this parabola. The pitch pilot will pull 1.8 G during 20 seconds to reach 50 degrees nose up. Then at the call out injection, we will push on the yoke, and to reach the 0G, that's the most difficult part of the parabola. It's to pass from 1.8 G to 0. And not 0.1 but 0.0001. So that's our target. And during the 22 seconds of the parabola, we keep this accuracy of the 0G. And then when you reach 50 degrees north down, you have to become again an aircraft, and you pull out 1.5 at the beginning and then 1.8, and to recover the situation and to come back at the departure point. And let's do that 31 times.
Very good. Is when you're performing the maneuvers in the simulator for the first time, obviously you're not feeling that gravity.
No, the simulator is
hit you.
basically.
So then,
no
when
G.
when you get to the G, how long does it take to get used to that feeling while you're operating the aircraft? Because I sat in the aircraft, feeling it, thinking the entire time, there's no way I could fly an aircraft while feeling this.
It's totally different in the cockpit because you know what will happen. You know exactly what will happen. Okay, the first time you feel the pressure on your body at 1.8 G, and you feel the zero gravity at your first injection. But really, when you are in control, when you are at control of the aircraft, you cannot feel it. You don't feel anything because you are so focused on your task. You cannot think about what's happened. And 22 seconds is very short. And so you are so focused on the fly to fly this maneuver. I don't say you cannot feel, but it's well behind. So you think well after the maneuver, you will feel oh what happened? Yeah, I feel my body, etc. But during the maneuver, no, it's impossible. You are so focused, you cannot imagine. It's you are looking at your instrument and you are focused on your instrument, and that's it. Everything can happen, anything can happen around you. You are so focused.
Is there anything about the flight tech that's been modified specifically for this aircraft?
There is no major modification in this aircraft. The only modification we introduced in this A310 is the accelerometers, the way to display the information in the cockpit. So we get two screens with an accelerometer in two different scales. One large scale to fly the pull up and pull out, 1.8 G, and one very, very accurate scale to fly the maneuver by itself. Part of that, and of course the cabin. The cabin is totally modified to remove the seats, put some foam everywhere, and to provide electricity and air for the science.
Does it fly any differently than an A310 that hasn't?
I don't know. It's a very standard 310. When we fly, when we ferry this aircraft from Bordeaux to somewhere else, it's a very standard A310, brand new A310.
How is the maintenance because of the high pressure of the wings and the structure?
So with Airbus, we have carried out a big study on the aircraft, and we have divided the aircraft, or some parts have a life cycle different than standard operation. So that means we have some beta factors on the engine. For example, one parabola is one cycle. So that means it's equal to one landing, one takeoff.
Okay.
Every parabola, so that means this morning 31 parabola plus one takeoff, one landing means 32 cycles on the engine.
Wow.
So that means 32 flights.
Okay.
So it's a lot. And for other parts, we have some beta factor of one parabola, 5 cycles. So we shorten the life cycle of some parts, very dedicated parts with it was an Airbus study, and we trust them on their job. So it's to ensure we have a safe aircraft at any time. So more or less, we have the same maintenance than an airline. If this aircraft fly more or less 10 to 15 hours per day. So. But we fly only 35 flights a year, but we have we have the more or less the same maintenance schedule than a standard airline who operates this aircraft daily.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Over maintenance for sure, but that's the price to pay to get this aircraft. To be sure, the aircraft is always in good condition for this repetitive maneuver because we are in the certified envelope of the aircraft. Zero is in the middle of the flight envelope, a certified flight envelope of any aircraft. The only thing we change is the repetitive action to stay 20 seconds at zero, and the repetitive action of 1.8 G, which is impossible on a standard airline.
Okay, Jason, what universe would we be living in if they had gone through with that plan?
I mean, an A380 Zero G aircraft, I mean, logistically, that probably would have been an absolute nightmare. Just not only just having to deal with all of the issues that come along with flying an A380 somewhere, but then operating it like as a parabolic aircraft. Would you have different people experiencing weightlessness on the different decks of the aircraft? How would that even work?
So the plan, as I understand it, was to just convert the main deck to parabolic flight setup. And what they would have done is they would have combined, and Jean-François kind of mentioned this, they would have combined the different campaigns. Because right now, Novespace runs campaigns. The one that I was just on was managed by the German Aerospace Research Center, the DLR. And they also run campaigns for CNES, which is the French space agency, and they run campaigns for ESA, the European Space Agency. So they do different campaigns throughout the year. Here, they would have consolidated their campaigns because they have such a large aircraft. To make it financially feasible, they would have had to consolidate these campaigns. And that creates all sort of logistical problems in its own right. But the most interesting thing here, as far as this AvGeek is concerned, is that there are rumors, and I haven't been able to track this down, but there are rumors that video of the parabolic test flight that they performed exists. So it is now my life's mission to track down this video, if in fact it does exist. So if you are listening to this podcast and you know anything about a video showing the A380 in parabolic flight, please email us, podcast@fr24.com. And I'm going to look into this a lot more, because this has taken me down a path of fascinating research that I'm thrilled to go down.
And I would like to subscribe to your newsletter and learn more.
It's funny because I often send out our weekly newsletter, and then you mention things that are in the newsletter as if you haven't read the newsletter. So
I look at it sometimes.
Maybe you should subscribe to the newsletter. Hey,
I subscribe.
Perfect plug. This is an accidental ad. We have a weekly Flightradar 24 newsletter. The newsletter includes things like what's in the podcast this week and what else happened in aviation and some of the best aviation photography. So if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, you can find the show notes and click on the link that we have put there, linking you to the newsletter, or you can go to flightradar24.com and click on social and click newsletter. There, accidental ad complete.
Perfect.
What else happened this week in aviation?
I think it all happened today. A lot of stuff today, like moments before we started recording, which is very odd because usually it's moments after. But things are happening in Russia. Some airlines are ordering some planes. Some are actually returning some planes unexpectedly. But the big news out of Aeroflot is that, well, they need aircraft. And there's only one place they can really get them from, and that would be within Russia. And today they announced a very large order for 339 domestically produced aircraft from UAC. That would be 210 MS-21, 89 Superjet New, which I don't know what that is. I guess it's a play on Neo or something. Whatever they've done to the Superjet to make it domestically produced completely. I guess that's what that is. And then 40 Tu-214. They'll all be coming from 2023 to 2030, or maybe later, or maybe never. Who knows with what's going on in Russia. But some people speculated that this means they're going to return aircraft and they need to backfill. I would argue that that's absolutely not going to happen. It's probably just they realize, like everyone else does, that at some point the Western aircraft that they've stolen will no longer be flight worthy and they can't support them anymore. So they are fully aware they need to build and deploy their own aircraft. And that seems to be what Aeroflot's doing. So the days of Aeroflot, I guess, being a modern Western aircraft fleeted airline is seemingly on the horizon of ending.
The whole thing is just surreal.
It is. And they turned up the rhetoric a bit. And I'll quote here from, I don't care, whatever dingus in Russia is writing this press release, but Boeing and Airbus, which are unlikely to ever be delivered to Russia again, will be replaced by Russian-made aircraft. MC-21 will be the flagship of the Aeroflot fleet. Sure, why not? I guess it will be the default flagship of Aeroflot because everything else is going to be grounded at some point.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of run out of options,
right?
Yeah, you got to pick something. Why not the MC-21?
Why not? Reminder: is it the MC? No, it's MC-21. Sorry, not MS-21. I guess I got that wrong. But yeah, that aircraft's not certified yet, is it?
It's on its way. So
almost. It's almost
assumes
there.
that they'll eventually certify it.
Yeah, it was almost there, but not quite.
And then you mentioned they're giving back planes.
I did.
Are they trying to get rid of the old Superjets? Or are they like, here, Interjet, take them?
No, suddenly they really need those. But it appears that this comes from Flight Global, that the Russian government's actually granted the S7 group permission to return a pair of leased 737 MAXs because they were never certified to operate in Russia from the outset. So they were able to get them to agree to export them to Turkey, interestingly enough. So that's an interesting twist.
I look forward to Steve Giordano's trip to Turkey to pick them up.
Yes, that's that's an interesting. Now, remind me, they were delivered to S7. Was the MAX ever certified for flight in Russia, or certified after the grounding? I'm a little fuzzy on the timeline there.
It was never recertified.
Right, there you go. So S7 said, "Hey, we have these aircraft that we actually can't fly because they are not certified here," and I guess that's just proof that Russia has no intention on, I guess, ever certifying the MAX for flight in Russia.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I would be a lot more surprised if Russia certified the MAX out of spite, just so they could keep the planes. That seems like a lot of work to go through.
Yeah, but things are certainly shaping up in Russia to be drastically different than they were just like 3 months ago. It hasn't even been that long, but a lot of changes coming to Aeroflot. Not by choice.
Well,
I mean, no one at Aeroflot wants this.
That's fair. Okay, so Russia ordered planes. They're giving some planes back. And then Israel's banning planes? Yeah, I saw this last week. And then you listed this, and remind me what's going on here, sir.
Well, apparently Israel doesn't like 4-engined aircraft anymore, which is quite surprising because I'm pretty sure there are some cargo or freight airlines operating out of Tel Aviv, which is surprising. But this comes from DanDeals.com, of all places, written by Dan himself. He says the Israel Airports Authority, IAA, has announced that effective March 31st of next year, planes with 4 engines are banned from landing in Israel, and that'd be commercial aircraft. So your 747s, passenger or freighter, A340, A380s. Yeah, none of those aircraft, I believe, are scheduled, at least passenger-wise, to operate to Israel, but that doesn't exclude it from happening in the future. I know Lufthansa has done that before, especially with the 340, but there are freighters that fly to Israel. So I'm really confused at why they would do this. Now, they cite issues of sustainability, environmentalism, and noise concerns, but not even France has even talked about something like this before. I don't know what to make of this.
I mean, it seems weird that they would do this now and without any publicity campaign around it. Like, because if it was a sustainability thing, they would be like, look, we're banning 4-engined aircraft because they're less sustainable than 2-engined aircraft, which may or may not be true depending on a whole host of economic and flight factors.
Same thing on the noise side. If you put an A380 over your head and then immediately pass out with one of like United's elderly domestic 777s, that 2-engine aircraft is going to be a hell of a lot louder than the A380.
So speaking of A380s, the first thing that comes to mind is that Emirates recently began regular service to Tel Aviv.
That is mentioned in the article.
Oh, okay. There you go. I mean, did they talk any more about that? Because one thing that comes to mind is it prevents Emirates from bringing the A380 into Tel Aviv.
It's suspected that could be it. Could be a factor. That's quite a dramatic protectionism move if that is the case, when they could just say, we no longer accept A380s here because of space constraints or operational constraints or whatever, and pretty much only Emirates would be affected by that. But they've gone the extreme method here of just banning all 4-engine aircraft. I wondering if this is actually going to become a thing or if this is kind of just blustering. Maybe they do it, maybe they don't, but we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it all ends up. We've got Finnair as well today announcing that they've needed to figure out a new way forward with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and then the lack of availability of Russian airspace to Finnair. Their whole business model, their whole long-haul business model was Helsinki is closer to East Asia through Russian airspace than any other airline.
Whoops.
We'll get you there faster and we'll get you there nicely. And now they can't do that. So what they're doing is they're reducing the number of aircraft in their fleet. They're going to fly fewer routes and they're going to fly to more Middle East and India destinations. And they're also saying that they're going to reduce unit costs and they're going to right-size their fleet, their staff, make sure everyone's contributing to cost reductions. They didn't really mention how all of that is going to take place. But assuming it's the case, there will be a new Finnair. I know that there was a lot of concern initially that the impact to Finnair was, besides the Russian airlines themselves, the impact to Finnair would be the biggest because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I should say, besides the Russian and the Ukrainian airlines, that Finnair would be most impacted. So they're figuring it out. We'll see if it works for them. But they've announced their plans. Let's see if they can stick to it and make things work.
Yeah, I think they announced specifically that they'd be removing a pair of A350s and an A330, maybe the other way around as well from the fleet. So there are some long-haul fleet reductions as well.
Oh, yeah. We didn't list this, but speaking of long-haul fleet reductions, this comes from our chief short answer correspondent / chief mergers and acquisitions correspondent, Ned Russell, who was reporting on SAS's bankruptcy proceedings earlier this week. And that airline, SAS, is getting rid of a pair of A350s and a few A330s, one of which I saw before Ned's reporting, I saw in Stockholm all buttoned up. So they had the engines, they had plastic over
they're already ready to go.
The engines. They are ready to go into storage and hopefully be returned to the lessor when that may or may not be approved by the judge, but I assume it will be. So at least 5 wide-body aircraft, I think 2 A350s and 3 A330s leaving the SAS fleet in the near future.
Yeah. So a couple more things, actually 2 more off-agenda items I'm going to go with because, I'm scrolling through Ned's Twitter feed. He's at @ByERussell on Twitter. And there's a couple things I forgot about here. So Blue Air announced a couple of days ago that they're suspending operations, at least for probably about a week. But if you've been in this industry long enough, you kind of know that when an airline suspends flights because of monetary reasons, they often don't come back. They're not a small airline. They have a sizable fleet, I think, of a couple dozen aircraft, potentially. Some 737 MAX. Maybe it's actually smaller than that, maybe half a dozen. But it's never great to see an airline suspend operations like that because more often than not, they don't come back. And other airlines have already filled the void. Ned reported that Wizz Air kind of swooped in real quick and has added 5 more aircraft to its base in Bucharest, launching 3 new routes and adding frequencies on 30 more. So that's kind of exactly what happens when a small carrier like this takes a bit of a pause due to some sort of issues. Another airline's going to swoop in and fill that void, and Blue Air might not return. I hope they do, but might not happen.
Yeah, we'll know as of September 12th whether or not they're back in action. I will say that there's, maybe a 30% return rate for first-time suspending operations.
Yeah,
but if they ever do it again, it's just not coming back.
Yeah, they have 14 aircraft, by the way, 5 737 MAX 8, 6 800s, a 700, and a couple 500s. They've got more MAX 8s on order, ready to be delivered, but not great. I got one more thing. This is just kind of funny. And before we get our last thing, so
before
you might
we do
remember,
our last hurrah, okay.
Yeah, you might remember last year, United re-entered the JFK market years after really making a bad mistake by leaving JFK and consolidating at Newark. And it was big fanfare, 767s with Polaris. And they were only able to do that temporarily during COVID when overall air traffic dipped real low. Now it seems they can't get permanent slots at JFK. And now they are threatening that they might end service at JFK in October unless the FAA does something. And that's something that United is suggesting would be lifting the cap on flights or lifting the slot restrictions so United can get its fair shake at JFK. And they cite all sorts of things that happened in recent years, like taxiway widening and high-speed taxiways off runways. But anyone who's actually been to JFK in the last few years knows that, yeah, there have been improvements, but when push comes to shove and the weather isn't perfect, JFK is just as bad as it's ever been with your line of 45 aircraft waiting to depart at 8 p.m. So it seems like a real bluff from United that, hey, if you don't do this industry-changing thing at JFK, we're just going to pack up and go back to Newark. I hope that doesn't happen. I like having Newark at JFK, but this seems like a real shot in the dark here.
I mean, given all of the commenting that United has done about Newark, it's a real smack in the face to hear them turn around and be like, well, you should give us special treatment at JFK.
No. Buy your slots like anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, do they expect the FAA to play ball, or is this just kind of like a really good, poor marketing? I'm very confused as to why they would go this route. But
I don't know. I mean, buy yourself a time machine, go back to 2015, and get back those 24 slots they leased out to Delta, which they can't get back. That seems like the only way to go.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Okay, now it is time for what is accidentally not breaking news, but not many people have talked about it yet.
It's weird, really weird. So our friend of the show, John Ostrow, every now and then tweets out, "Stand by for news." And the airline industry kind of stops and waits and refreshes to see what he's saying. And usually it's something really good. And he's been quiet on this one. And everyone else was quiet. This has been published for a day and a half here, and really no one picked up on it until just about 30 minutes ago. But AIN published a piece about Boom, and the title is just "As Boom Seeks Engines, Airlines Mull Supersonic Use Case." And they really buried the lead. And that lead would be Rolls-Royce is not going to build their engine for them.
That is a rented an excavator.
It's in the third
very
paragraph.
Large hole.
And then
put the lead down there and
it's
then
in the
buried
fourth
over.
paragraph. And the quote from Rolls is a kind of, I don't know, I'm just going to read it. Quoting here, "We've completed our contract with Boom and delivered various engineering studies for their Overture supersonic program. After careful consideration, Rolls-Royce has determined that the commercial aviation supersonic market is not currently a priority for us, and therefore will not pursue further work on the program at this time." They go on to say, "It has been a pleasure to work with the Boom team, and we wish them every success in the future." Wow. I mean, that sounds nice, but that basically is Rolls-Royce telling Boom to get lost.
Well, I mean, what it says
here.
to me, what it says to me is if you have a few $1 billion handy that you want to pay us to build you a specific engine, we are happy to do so.
And they might.
But there's no way we're going to spend our own money building you an engine.
Who knows what the investing ecosystem has in store for the future? Maybe they can come up with the billions. I don't know. But as it stands now, Rolls-Royce will not be developing an engine for Boom's Overture aircraft, and I don't see anyone else stepping up to the plate here to take a shot at that. So that 2025 first flight seems exceedingly, even more than usual, unlikely, or no, not unlikely, seemingly more impossible than usual.
Yeah, I mean, even if you believe that Boom has a chance at success, at developing an engine, developing an airframe, testing it, putting it into the air, I don't think anyone is under the impression, at this point at least, that the timeline that the company has used is an accurate one of their capabilities and a realistic one of their processes and probability of making first flight. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, that's the thing. If Boom had come out with a more realistic timeline, I'd be much more willing to give them, in my eyes, the credibility that they might deserve. But to stick with this deadline of 3 years from now having a first flight despite not having an engine, even in development, that's crazy. And it's kind of disrespectful to the industry, though. Everyone knows better. It's not possible to do that. I don't know. But at this point, all we know is we know who will not build the engine. And we are absolutely no closer to knowing who will, if anyone, build that engine.
Yeah. The response by Boom to this, which I don't think has come out yet, will be very interesting to read.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. Haven't seen anything yet.
That's all I'll say there. But this has been episode 180 of AvTalk. I have had a rather enjoyable week, a maddening week getting here, but a thrilling and satisfying and uplifting week being here.
Come on home. Your family misses you probably.
Not only for they finally let me out of the house. Not only for what it was, but the thing that I liked most about the flight was not the actual flight itself, though that was beyond amazing. But the thing I liked most about it was hearing afterwards the scientists talk about their successful experiments, because they put so much work into designing these experiments, designing the physical structures to put on the aircraft. Then they have to do, I was just there taking video and pictures and floating around for a few minutes. They're on this 3-hour flight in hypergravity to microgravity to hypergravity again 31 times while running equipment and experiments. And to me, that was just absolutely incredible. And to hear them talk about it and see the look in their eyes when they've gotten data was just the coolest thing in the world. So I will leave it at that. Episode 180 of AvTalk from Bordeaux and from New York. We will be back home next week with a much less up and down episode, I promise.
I get it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next week. As always, I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.